your job, maid!
Disrespect my daughter again and get out! Gladly!
But tomorrow, you'll learn whose house and whose money you've been living on.
The moment my husband slapped me in front of 30 people, I knew our marriage was over. What he did not know was that, by sunrise, the house he had ordered me out of, the business that paid his bills, and the secret he had spent 2 years hiding would all belong to his past. Hello, my name is Elena Carter. I am 46 years old, and until last summer, I believed patience was the same thing as love. I met my husband Mark 6 years earlier at a charity dinner in Columbus, Ohio. I owned a small but successful catering company called Hearth and Honey. Mark worked in commercial sales. He was confident, funny, and very good at making a woman feel as if she were the only person in a crowded room. He also had a daughter from his first marriage. Brooke was 19 when Mark and I married. She lived with her mother most of the year, but she visited often. At first, she was polite. Not warm, exactly, but polite. I never pushed her to call me mom. I told her she already had a mother, and that I would be happy simply to be someone she could trust. For a while, I thought we were building something real. The house was mine before the wedding. My late father had helped me buy it through a small holding company, when Hearth and Honey finally turned a profit. It was an old brick colonial with a deep backyard, 2 maple trees, and a stone patio I had saved 3 years to build. Mark knew I had bought the house, but he never cared about legal details. Once he moved in, he began calling it our house. A year later, he started calling it his house. That change happened so slowly that I almost missed it. Mark began helping with my company after he lost his sales job. I gave him the title of operations director because I wanted to protect his pride. He handled vendors, vehicle leases, and event contracts. I still controlled payroll and ownership, but I trusted him with a company card and access to our operating account. That was my first serious mistake. My second was explaining away every warning sign. When he came home late, he said a supplier meeting had run long. When Brooke posted pictures from expensive restaurants, he said her mother was paying. When invoices appeared for equipment I had never seen, he told me delivery had been delayed. Then, 3 months before the barbecue, my accountant Priya Shah called me into her office and closed the door. "Elena," she said, "I need you to look at these transfers." There were 9 of them. Each was small enough to avoid drawing attention, but together they totaled more than $84,000. The money had gone from Hearth and Honey to a consulting company called BKC Solutions. I had never heard of it. The initials bothered me. BKC. Brooke's full name was Brooke Kendall Carter. Priya advised me not to confront Mark. She brought in a forensic accountant named Daniel Ruiz, and we quietly limited Mark's permissions without making the changes obvious. We copied invoices, downloaded security logs, and traced payments. Every day I went home and ate dinner across from the man we were investigating. That is a special kind of loneliness. Mark would ask about my day, kiss my forehead, and complain that I worried too much. Sometimes he would place his hand over mine. I would look at his wedding ring and wonder whether the hand touching me was the same hand that had approved those transfers. 2 weeks before the barbecue, Daniel found the answer. BKC Solutions had been formed by Brooke 8 months earlier. It had no employees, no office, and no real clients. Hearth and Honey was its only source of income. Payments from BKC had covered Brooke's apartment, a luxury SUV, and deposits to an online investment account. I felt sick, but Daniel told me there was more. Mark had also forged my electronic approval on 2 equipment loans. He used company vehicles as collateral, then redirected part of the loan money. If the fraud continued, I could lose the business my father had helped me build. "We have enough to act," Daniel said. I asked for 48 hours. That sounds foolish now. Maybe it was. But I needed to know whether Mark would tell me the truth if I gave him one last chance. The barbecue was already planned for Saturday. Mark had invited neighbors, former co-workers, and several people from the country club he had recently joined with my money. Brooke arrived at noon wearing white linen and sunglasses that cost more than my first car payment. I spent the morning preparing food because cooking calmed me. I marinated chicken, made potato salad, sliced fruit, and set pitchers of lemonade on the patio. 2 employees from Hearth and Honey offered to help, but Mark said it was a family party and told them not to come. By 3 o'clock, the backyard was full. Music played. Smoke rose from the grill. People laughed under strings of lights Mark had made me hang the night before. He moved through the crowd like a politician. One arm around a guest, one hand holding a drink, always telling a story in which he was the hero. I watched him and waited for a private moment. It never came. Instead, Brooke walked into the kitchen, dropped an empty glass beside the sink, and said, "We're out of ice." There are 2 bags in the garage freezer, I said. Would you bring one out? She stared at me as if I had asked her to dig a ditch. I'm a guest. So is everyone else. I replied. I've been working since 8. I could use a hand. She gave a little laugh and went back outside. 10 minutes later, I carried a tray of burgers onto the patio. Brooke stood beside the pool with 3 friends. When she saw me, she snapped her fingers. The trash is overflowing, she said. I thought I had misheard her. Excuse me. She pointed toward the garbage bins. Do your job, maid. The conversation around us stopped. Her finger was inches from my face. Her friends looked embarrassed, but Brooke smiled. It was not a careless joke. It was a performance. She wanted me to understand that she believed I existed to serve her. I set down the tray. Watch your mouth, I said. I did not shout. I did not touch her. I spoke 4 calm words. Mark came rushing across the patio as if I were the one who had attacked someone. What did you say to her? He demanded. You heard me. Brooke folded her arms. She threatened me. No, I said. I told her to show basic respect. Mark's face changed. I had seen him angry before, but this was different. He looked frightened. For 1 second, his eyes moved from me to Brooke, and I understood they had been talking about me. They had built a story in which I was weak, dependent, and too grateful to resist. Then Mark slapped me. The sound cut through the backyard. My head turned. The tray fell from my hands. Somewhere behind me, a woman gasped. Mark leaned close enough for me to smell bourbon on his breath. You're nothing but a poor freeloader, he yelled. Get out of my house. No one moved. My cheek burned, but my mind became strangely clear. I looked at the people around us. Some stared at the ground. Some held their phones. Our neighbor Mrs. Alvarez was already walking toward me. I raised one hand to stop her. Then I looked at Mark. All right, I said. That was all. I went upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and packed 1 suitcase. I took clothes, medication, my passport, my laptop, and the blue folder Daniel had told me to keep near me. I left the jewelry Mark had given me. I took my mother's watch. While I packed, Mark continued the party. I could hear music start again. I could hear him laughing too loudly. He probably believed my silence meant surrender. He had always mistaken quiet for weakness. Before I left, I opened the security app on my phone. 4 cameras covered the patio and back doors. Mark had installed them himself after a string of neighborhood burglaries. The video had already uploaded to cloud storage. His slap, his words, Brooke's insult. Everything was recorded. I saved 3 copies. As I crossed the front hall, Brooke stood near the stairs holding a glass of wine. Where will you go? She asked. Her voice was softer now, almost curious. I looked at her and said, somewhere I'm expected. Then I left. I drove to Priya's house. She opened the door, saw my face, and did not ask whether I wanted tea. She asked whether I wanted the police. I said yes. An officer photographed the swelling on my cheek and took my statement. I emailed him the video. Mrs. Alvarez and 2 other guests agreed to be witnesses. By midnight, I had filed for an emergency protection order. At 12:17 a.m., Daniel joined Priya and me at the kitchen table. We had planned to confront Mark on Monday. The slap changed the schedule. I signed the documents in the blue folder. First, I revoked Mark's access to every company account. Second, I removed him as an authorized representative on the equipment leases. Third, I placed an emergency fraud hold on payments connected to BKC Solutions. Fourth, I authorized Daniel to send our evidence to the bank, our insurance carrier, and the police financial crimes unit. Then Priya handed me one final form. It terminated Mark's employment for cause. My hand shook when I signed it, not because I doubted the decision, but because I finally understood how much of my life had been built around protecting a man who had never protected me. At 7:03 the next morning, my phone began to ring. Mark. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. Then again. On the 6th call, I answered and turned on recording. For the first time in my life, I heard my husband crying. Elena, he said, what did you do? His voice was broken and wet. Behind him, I could hear Brooke shouting. Good morning, Mark. My cards don't work. The bank froze everything. My email is locked. Daniel says I'm fired. Fix this right now. I can't fix the truth. He took a sharp breath. You're trying to destroy me over one mistake. Which mistake? Hitting me, stealing from my company, forging my approval, or teaching your daughter that I was her servant. Silence. Then he changed tactics. Baby, please, I was drunk. Brooke upset me. The money was temporary. I was going to put it back. With what? He had no answer. Come home, he whispered. We can talk. I am coming home, I said. But you won't be there. He stopped crying. What does that mean? It means the house belongs to Larkspur Holdings, the company my father created for me before we married. You are not on the deed. You never paid the mortgage, because there hasn't been one for 9 years. My attorney is delivering notice today. The protection order means you cannot be there when I return. His breathing became slow and heavy. You can't throw me out of my own home. Yesterday, you said it was your house. Today, you can explain that to a judge. Brooke grabbed the phone. You evil. I ended the call before she finished. At 9 that morning, 2 officers accompanied me to the house. Mark stood in the driveway wearing yesterday's clothes. His eyes were red. Brooke sat on the curb beside 3 designer suitcases, furiously typing on her phone. The party decorations still hung in the backyard. Half-empty glasses covered the patio. A trash bag had split beside the kitchen door. For one absurd second, I almost started cleaning. Old habits do not disappear just because the truth arrives. Then I walked past the mess. Mark tried to approach me, but an officer stepped between us. My attorney gave him written instructions for collecting the rest of his property. He had 72 hours, supervised, and he was forbidden to contact me except through counsel. Elena, he said, tell them this is a misunderstanding. I looked at the bruise forming beneath my eye. No, I said, this is the first time I understand perfectly. That afternoon the story became more complicated. Daniel called with news about BKC Solutions. The money had not gone only to Brooke's apartment and car. Nearly $30,000 had been transferred to a woman named Cynthia Lane. I knew the name. Cynthia was Mark's former sales manager. The woman he claimed he disliked. The woman whose supplier meetings always ended late. Daniel found hotel charges, weekend flights, and messages stored in Mark's company email. The affair had lasted 14 months. Cynthia believed Mark was preparing to leave me and become part owner of Hearth and Honey. He had promised her a new life financed by the sale of my company. When Daniel told me, I expected another wave of heartbreak. Instead, I laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the sound a locked door makes when it finally opens. Mark had not only stolen money, he had created a fantasy empire using my labor, my house, and my name. Brooke believed she was an heiress. Cynthia believed she was the future wife of a wealthy businessman. Mark stood in the center, telling each woman a different lie. I sent Cynthia one email through my attorney. It contained no insults and no threats. It contained copies of the company ownership records, Mark's termination letter, and the fraud report. Her reply arrived 11 minutes later. She had not known. By evening, Mark had lost his wife, his job, his house, his company access, and his girlfriend. But justice was not finished. The financial crimes investigation took 4 months. During that time, Mark told anyone who would listen that I was vindictive. He claimed I had set him up. Brooke posted vague messages online about cruel stepmothers and women who use money to control families. I did not respond publicly. I answered through documents. Bank records showed the transfers. Login data showed Mark's computer approving them. A handwriting expert confirmed that my signature on the loan guarantee had been copied. Security footage showed the assault. Witnesses confirmed what happened before and after it. Facts are patient. They do not shout, and they do not need applause. Brooke's situation changed when investigators proved she had created BKC Solutions and submitted false consulting invoices. Her attorney advised her to cooperate. Within a week, she admitted that Mark had given her the descriptions to place on the invoices. She claimed she thought it was legal. Maybe she did. Maybe she did not. Either way, arrogance had turned into fear. As part of her agreement, she returned the SUV, surrendered what remained in the investment account, and provided her messages with Mark. Those messages hurt more than the affair. In one, Mark wrote, "Elena won't notice. She only cares about menace and tablecloths." In another, Brooke asked, "What if she finds out?" The Mark replied, "She has nowhere else to go." I read that sentence twice. He believed I had nowhere else to go while he was living in my house and stealing from my business. That was when my sadness finally became anger. Not wild anger. Useful anger. I stopped asking why he had done it. I started asking what I wanted my life to become. I expanded Hearth and Honey. I promoted my kitchen manager, Tasha, to director of operations. She had earned the position years earlier, but I had overlooked her because I was busy protecting Mark's pride. Under Tasha's leadership, waste dropped, staff retention improved, and we won a contract with a regional hospital network. I also changed the house. I painted the bedroom walls a pale green Mark had once called boring. I turned his office into a reading room. I replaced the oversized television with shelves. On the patio, I removed the bar he had built and planted lavender along the stone wall. The first night I slept there alone, I expected silence to frighten me. It did not. Silence, without fear inside it, is peace. 6 months after the barbecue, Mark accepted a plea agreement. He admitted to wire fraud, forgery, and theft from the company. Because it was his first conviction and because most of the money was recovered, he did not receive the long prison sentence people imagine in stories. Real justice is rarely dramatic enough for television. He received 18 months in federal custody, followed by supervised release. He was ordered to pay restitution. The court also extended my protection order. Brooke received probation, community service, and a restitution obligation of her own. She moved back in with her mother. Her luxury car was gone. So were most of the friends who had enjoyed it. On the day of Mark's sentencing, he asked through his attorney whether he could speak to me. I almost refused. Then I decided I wanted to see whether he had learned the difference between regret and remorse. We stood in a quiet courthouse hallway. A deputy remained nearby. Mark looked smaller than I remembered. His expensive haircut had grown out. His suit was wrinkled. For years, his confidence had filled every room. Now it seemed like a costume left on the wrong man. "I'm sorry," he said. I waited. I lost everything. There it was. Not, "I hurt you." Not, "I betrayed you." Not, "I was wrong." I lost everything? No, I told him. You spent everything. Trust, love, opportunity. You spent all of it as if there would never be a bill. His eyes filled with tears again. "Did you ever love me?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "That is why this cost me something too." He looked down. "Can you forgive me?" I thought about the woman I had been at the barbecue. The woman carrying food to people who barely noticed her. Waiting for permission to ask her own husband for honesty. "Forgiveness is not the same as access," I said. "I may forgive you one day. You will still never enter my life again." Then I walked away. A year after the barbecue, I hosted another gathering in the backyard. This one was for the employees of Hearth and Honey and their families. Tasha's children chased bubbles across the grass. Priya brought a chocolate cake. Mrs. Alvarez stood near the lavender and told everyone, for the 10th time, how beautiful it smelled. At sunset, I carried one final tray to the patio. Tasha reached for it. "Boss, sit down. We've got this." I laughed and let her take it. For most of my life, I thought being needed made me valuable. Mark understood that and used it against me. He let me cook, clean, earn, forgive, and carry the weight of his lies. Then his daughter called me a maid, and he struck me because I refused the title. That slap was meant to put me in my place. Instead, it showed me that my place was anywhere he could no longer reach me. People sometimes ask whether I regret destroying his life. I tell them the truth: I did not destroy it. I simply stopped using my hands to hold it together. Mark called me a freeloader in a house I owned. Brooke called me a maid while spending money I earned. They mistook my kindness for dependence and my silence for surrender. They were wrong. And if there is one thing I learned, it is this: never underestimate the woman who quietly packs one suitcase. She may not be leaving with nothing. She may be leaving with the truth. And the truth knows exactly how to collect what it is owed.